Hi, everybody, and welcome to the first Ocho Baseball podcast, where I'll be discussing weekly how the Blue Jays are doing throughout the season. So if you're a baseball fan, sit back, relax, and hopefully you'll enjoy the show. I'm your host, Dave Speed Ocho. Let's get things started. So, the first week of the season saw the Blue Jays on the road for 6 games in New York and Baltimore to take on division rivals in the Yankees and Orioles. Game 1 took place on Monday, and it saw the Blue Jays get off to a great start to the season as they beat the Yankees 6-1. It looked early on as if Jose Reyes almost went down with an injury yet again. It happened on a play when he was running to first and the ball got thrown past the first baseman, and as he was rounding first base to try to advance to second on the throw in air, Reyes got his feet tangled up with, I believe it was Stephen Drew, who was trying to back up the play, and once he got into second, Jose sort of put his hands on his knees and took a deep breath. The trainer came out, took a look at him. He seemed to be alright. He stayed in the game. Thankfully, no injury. Jays fans, I'm sure, held their collective breaths as we've seen Jose go down to injury early in the season the past 2 years, and we certainly didn't want to see it again for a third. The Blue Jays opened the scoring in the game in the top of the third on that play by Jose Reyes. He was basically trying to lay down a sacrifice bunt in order to move Kevin Pillar and Devin Travis over. However, because of the thrown air, Pillar managed to score on the play. Devin Travis went to third, Jose Reyes went to second, and it was 1-0 Blue Jays. Russell Martin quickly followed that up by hitting a ground ball to right fielder Carlos Beltran. Both Travis and Reyes would score on the play, making it 3-0 for the Blue Jays. A couple of batters later, Edwin Encarnacion would get the first Blue Jays home run of the year as he would cash in himself and Russell Martin to make it 5-0 Blue Jays early on. Drew Hutchison started the first game of the season for the Blue Jays, and he was cruising early on. He retired the first 6 Yankees batters he faced until he walked Alex Rodriguez in the bottom of the third to allow the Yankees to get their first base runner. However, Hutchison would retire the next 3 batters and wouldn't surrender any damage in the inning. The Yankees would finally get to Hutchison in the bottom of the 6th when Brett Gardner would lead off the inning with a solo home run, which at the time made it 5-1 for Toronto. Overall, Hutchison did fairly good in his first outing. He went 6 innings pitched. He only allowed 3 hits. He gave up 2 walks. He struck out 3, and he allowed just the 1 run. Loop and Castro came in to close the door on the Yankees the rest of the way, and Devin Travis would add a solo home run in the top of the 7th to help lift the Blue Jays to a 7-1 victory. On to Game 2 with R.A. Dickey pitching, and he had his knuckleball working in this game early on, which was surprising because it was not very favorable weather in New York. It was cold and rainy, but Dickey still managed to go 6 1/3 innings. He only gave up 4 hits and 1 run on 3 walks and 4 strikeouts. The Blue Jays ended up scoring a couple runs on a few Yankees defensive misplays, which may or may not have been because of the weather. So the weather may have played a factor contributing to the Yankees' misplays, but I like to think that the Yankees were just playing sloppy defense. But the Blue Jays ended up scoring 3 runs, and they held a 3-1 lead going into the 8th inning. That's when everything went wrong. With Aaron Loop on in relief in the bottom of the 8th inning, Chris Young hit a double on a pop-up around the first base area. However, the wind was playing tricks with the ball and blew it all sorts of different ways, and none of the Blue Jays fielders who were trying to catch that ball could make the play, so Chris Young would actually get a double on a routine pop-up to first, which ended up being not so routine thanks to the weather. Jacoby Ellsbury would then single, putting runners at first and third, which brought up Brett Gardner, who Aaron Loop would hit with a pitch, loading the bases. That would be Loop's final batter, as Brett Cecil would come in to replace him, but things did not get much better from there. The first batter Cecil would face would be Carlos Beltran, who would go down swinging on strikes. However, during that at-bat, Brett Cecil threw a wild pitch which allowed Chris Young to score and allowed Ellsbury and Brett Gardner to move up to third and second respectively. With one out in the inning, the Blue Jays decided to intentionally walk Mark Teixeira in order to try and induce a ground ball double play and escape the inning with minimal damage. However, the next batter, Brian McCann, was then hit by Brett Cecil, so two hit batters in the ball game. With the bases loaded and Brian McCann being hit, that would bring in a run to tie the game at 3. The next batter was Chase Headley, and he would single on a ball hit to left fielder Kevin Pillar, and the Yankees would take a 4-3 lead, and they would hold on, and that would be your final score. So not a good relief appearance for either Loop or Cecil. A 3-1 should have been victory turned into a 4-3 loss. Game 3 would be the rubber match of the series, as the Jays were looking to win the game and win their first series of the season. They would do so, winning the game 6-3, thanks in large part to a 4-run second inning. The scoring in that 4-run second started thanks to Kevin Pillar hitting a single to left fielder Chris Young, which scored Edwin Encarnacion, who was already on base. Steve Tolson would follow that up with a ground out to Mark Teixeira. Josh Donaldson would score on that ground out. Danny Valencia, who was on second, would move to third, and Kevin Pillar, who was on first, would move to second. Devin Travis would hit into another ground out, but again that would score a run as Danny Valencia touched home plate to make it 3-0 for the Jays. And finally, Jose Reyes would single on a ground ball to right fielder Carlos Beltran, giving the Blue Jays that 4-0 lead in the second inning. The Yankees would get one back in the bottom of the 5th inning, thanks to a Didi Gregorius single which scored John Ryan Murphy. But the Blue Jays would get that run back in the top of the 6th as Josh Donaldson would score on a throw-in error by right fielder Carlos Beltran. Essentially, Danny Valencia was up to bat with Donaldson on first. Valencia singled to right field, and Josh Donaldson, who probably should have stayed at second, tried to get into third on the play. He would have been out. He was dead on arrival, but Carlos Beltran's throw went wide of third, which allowed Josh to end up scoring and giving the Blue Jays a 5-1 lead. The Yankees would get 2 runs back in the bottom of the 6th thanks to solo home runs by Alex Rodriguez and Mark Teixeira, but Edwin Encarnacion in the top of the 8th would hit his second home run of the season, giving the Blue Jays a 6-3 lead and ultimately a 6-3 victory. This was Daniel Norris's first career MLB start, and he would go 5 2/3 innings, giving up 6 hits and 3 runs. He walked 2 and struck out 5 batters. Osuna, Cecil, and Castro would come in to close the door the rest of the way, and the Blue Jays took 2 games out of a possible 3 in New York. From there, the Blue Jays traveled to Baltimore to take on the defending American League East champion Orioles. The first game was a laugher in the favor of the Blue Jays as they would win this one 12-5. I was working, so unfortunately I didn't get to see the game, but the Blue Jays hit 8 doubles in this game. 8. Pompey had 2. Navarro had 1, Batista had 1, Pillar had 1, Donaldson, Reyes, Travis, they each had 1 double. Surprisingly, for a 12-run game with the Blue Jays being involved, there were no home runs in this game. All the runs basically came from the double fest that the Blue Jays were putting on. The starting pitcher in this game was Mark Burley. He ended up going 6 innings. He allowed 2 runs on 8 hits. He walked 2 and struck out 1 on way to earning his 200th career win. So congratulations to Mark Burley on that impressive milestone. I know a lot of people don't like to include pitchers' wins and losses anymore, but it's still something special. I personally think when somebody gets a milestone win like 200 or 300. There's not so many 300 career winners anymore, but 200 is still pretty special in my book. So congratulations to Mark Burley. Hendricks, Hines, and Estrada would each work an inning of relief. Hines would end up giving up an extra 2 runs. Estrada would give up 1 run. Once again, the final score, the Blue Jays 12, the Orioles 5. Kevin Pillar also made an outstanding grab to rob Chris Davis of a home run in the 6th inning. And if that wasn't enough, Pillar also made an amazing throw the inning before, in the bottom of the 5th, when Adam Jones was trying to stretch a single into a double, and Pillar threw him out from the outfield on a fantastic throw. And this would just be a foreshadowing of things to come for young Kevin Pillar. The second game of the series saw the Orioles dismantle the Blue Jays 7-1, thanks in large part to outstanding pitching by Ubaldo Jimenez. Really? We got outplayed because Ubaldo Jimenez just was on fucking fire? This guy sucks! Where's the shitty Ubaldo Jimenez? That's what I want to know. Where's the Ubaldo Jimenez who usually gets rocked within 2 or 3 innings? This Ubaldo Jimenez ended up going 7 innings, only gave up 1 hit. He gave up 1 hit. He walked 1 and struck out 8. The Blue Jays just could not get anything going against Jimenez, and that was really the story of the game. They ended up getting 2 hits and a run off of Zach Britton in the top of the 9th, so they didn't end up getting shut out, thankfully. But this was not a very fun game for Blue Jays fans to watch. The Orioles would score 2 in the bottom of the 1st, 1 in the bottom of the 3rd, and 4 in the bottom of the 5th to give them their 7 runs. Aaron Sanchez was making his major league starting debut, just like Daniel Norris had done a few days previously. Sanchez worked a bit out of the pen last year towards the end of the season. This was his first major league start, as I said. Not very good for Aaron. He'll have better days, but in this game, he only went 3 1/3 innings. He gave up 3 runs on 7 hits. He walked 2, only struck out 1. Todd Redmond would come into the game later on to pitch 2 innings. He gave up an additional 4 runs to the Orioles. Hines and Hendricks also made appearances in this game. Neither of them ended up giving up any runs. Once again, your final was Baltimore 7, Toronto 1. Which brought us to the Sunday game. Once again, the Blue Jays found themselves in a rubber match, looking to win their second series of the season. And they would do so in a slugfest. The Blue Jays would get 2 in the 1st, 1 in the 2nd, 4 in the 3rd, 1 in the 4th, and 2 in the 8th. But the Orioles also scored 2 in the 1st, 2 in the 3rd, 3 in the 5th, and the Blue Jays would end up winning 10-7. The Blue Jays would open up the scoring in the 1st when Dalton Pompey hit a ball that looked like it should have just been a double, but upon review, the umpires decided that it hit the fence and was a home run. So thanks to that reviewed call and the umpires rewarding the Blue Jays with a home run, the Blue Jays got out to a quick 2-0 lead. However, the Orioles would get that back quickly in the bottom of the 1st when Adam Jones, with Chris Davis on base, hit a 2-run home run of his own, tying the game up at 2. On to the top of the 2nd, Kevin Pillar hit a solo home run to give the Blue Jays a 3-2 lead. After that, the Blue Jays would load the bases with Edwin Encarnacion, Deoner Navarro, and Russell Martin. Devin Travis then hit a ball over the head of Travis Snyder, and the play ended up being ruled an error. So instead of what should have been a 3 RBI double for Devin Travis, it was scored a 3-run error with Devin Travis reaching on the air. No matter how you score the play, ultimately it gave the Blue Jays a 6-2 lead. Jose Reyes would follow that up quickly, driving in Devin Travis when he singled to left field, giving the Blue Jays a 7-2 lead. However, the Orioles would get a couple runs back in the bottom of the third when Alejandro De Aza would score on a Chris Davis single, making it 7-3, followed by an Adam Jones single, which would score Steve Pearce and move Chris Davis to second, making the Blue Jays lead just 7-4. However, in the top of the fourth, with runners on second and third, Dioner Navarro would hit a sacrifice fly. Jose Bautista would score from third, Josh Donaldson would move up to third, and the Blue Jays would grab an 8-4 lead. In the bottom of the fifth, Travis Snider got 3 runs back for the Orioles as he hit a 3-run home run off of Drew Hutchison, scoring Steve Pearce and Adam Jones. It would remain a 1-run, 8-7 Blue Jays lead until the top of the eighth when Jose Bautista, who was facing Darren O'Day, hit a 2-run home run to give the Blue Jays a 10-7 lead and ultimately a 10-7 victory. Now, Bautista and O'Day have history with each other. This goes back to a couple of years ago when Darren O'Day struck out Jose Bautista to end an inning during a game at the Rogers Center. And after that strikeout, as O'Day was leaving the field, he was also chirping Jose Bautista. Well, the next day, Darren O'Day was on in relief again, once again facing Jose Bautista, who this time hit a home run off of him. And as Jose Bautista was circling third, he started yapping Darren O'Day. So these two have a history of bad blood. And this time, in this game, 2 or 3 pitches before Jose Bautista hit his home run, Darren O'Day actually threw a ball that just went over Jose Bautista's head, making him duck to get out of the way. And Jose Bautista did not take kindly to that at all. End result, Jose Bautista hit a home run, and after doing so, skipped gleefully to first base to flaunt the fact that he once again owned Darren O'Day. So the Blue Jays won 10-7. Hutchison, who was stellar, I thought, in his first appearance, was not so good in this one. He only went 4 1/3 innings. He gave up 7 runs on 7 hits, struck out 5, and walked a batter. He gave up 2 home runs, but fortunately, Loop, Osuna, Cecil, and Castro threw 4 2/3 shutout innings out of the bullpen to help keep the Jays in the game and eventually give them the win. So the Blue Jays won their first 2 series of the season as they end up going 4-2 against Baltimore and New York on the road, I might add, which I'm fairly impressed with. At the end of the first week, they were tied for the division lead with the Boston Red Sox, and they headed home to Toronto for their home opener on Monday, tied for the division lead. So I will take that. I am recording this podcast on Tuesday night, so they've already played their first 2 games at home against Tampa, and I already know the results of those games. However, I'm going to save that for next week's podcast. Once again, the Blue Jays start their season 4-2. Hopefully, this is the year that they finally end the drought and make the playoffs. Thank you guys for listening, and I will talk to you guys next week.